Rob, thanks so much for taking the time to do this, man. How you feeling?
Feeling great. We're about like 4 weeks out from World's Strongest Man now, so we're rolling.
Yeah, so you're coming off that great performance at the Arnold Strongman Classic. You leader after day one, wind up finishing inside the top 5. What are your main takeaways from your performance in Columbus?
That I finally finished top 5 at the Arnold. That was I've had that goal now for 3 years. So to finally eclipse that is was really, really exciting for me. The other takeaway is my grip still kind of stinks. So still, but it's all perspective, right? I mean, it was an 880-pound frame we had to carry up a ramp. And being a short, chubby dude isn't exactly working my favor sometimes.
And, it's funny you said that, like when you said your grip stinks, all I could think of, relatively speaking, of course, but you also mentioned that you're a certain distance out from the world's strongest man. What is, for a lot of people that maybe aren't as familiar with the training process for strongman, what does a prep cycle for a big competition like that look like?
So every contest is different, right? And that's the beautiful thing about strongman and why I love it so much. So I've been doing this sport for 13 years now. And I've never once done a competition that has the same events. So that's just like the coolest part for me. So transitioning from the Arnold into Worlds, they're two very different competitions. So the Arnold, we saw extremely heavy, very static in nature events, besides that frame carry that we had. Whereas World's Strongest Man tends to be a little bit lighter. It's a longer competition. So we're actually competing over the course of about 6 days as opposed to 2 at the Arnold. And there tends to be a lot more conditioning involved, right? So typically at World's Strongest Man, we see more carrying events, more medleys, a lot of running in between events, or rep events at World's Strongest Man, as opposed to the Arnold, which we see those heavier 1 rep max events.
So as you now move out of the Arnold Strongman Classic, what are the things that you look to, sort of dial in as you get ready for World's Strongest Man?
So my biggest thing is really that work capacity piece and trying to bring up my conditioning, right? I have that strength base from the Arnold, fortunately was able to perform there really well and trying to maintain a certain level of that strength while increasing my cardio and my endurance a little bit. Because, like I said, at World's Strongest Man, the Arnold Strongman Classic, we had a 1 rep max log press. Well, at World's Strongest Man, we're most likely going to be having a log clean and press for reps. Probably in that 340 to 350 pound range, but in 60 to 75 seconds, most of us guys are going to be hitting between 6 and 9 reps in that time. So, making that transition to having a little bit more cardio, a little more conditioning, and then better recovery in between events, that's really where the focus is right now. So my training right now, typically weekday, kind of your normal barbell movements, doing a lot of overhead pressing, squatting, deadlifting, stuff like that. Weekends where we get to have some fun and start playing around with the strongman implements. So doing sandbag carry and load medleys, yoke walks, farmers carries, Atlas stones, all that stuff is when we kind of throw those in on the weekends.
Mm-hmm. So we obviously come from a CrossFit background, and we see the training evolve over the year as athletes progress towards what are, well, I guess you would consider like the big dance or the big show for the games. And that includes, switching up the training. And it sounds like that's maybe the case for World's Strongest Man. And I'm just kind of curious what really sets it apart as like the premier event, whether it's from testing and events or what is thrown at you. Because the games, we see implements that you don't see the entire year.
So I think the biggest thing that sets World's Strongest Man apart is we're getting 30 athletes competing over the course of that 6 days all together, right? Typically, our contests are a lot smaller in size. So the Arnold Strongman Classic, we have 10 athletes. The Rogue Invitational, we had 10 athletes. And then some of the other qualifying events, we have maybe 10 to 12. World's Strongest Man is where we get 30 of the strongest men in the world to compete against each other to find who the strongest man actually is. And it really does get to be that great test of overall to find out who the best strongman is, right? Because strongman isn't just about being physically strong. You also have to have that athletic component to your capabilities. And that's really what we see World's Strongest Man. And not to mention, it's the most iconic title in our sport. And that's what guys really want to go for.
It seems like strongman has gotten more popular. And I don't want to say mainstream yet, but it's certainly getting more attention. Why do you think that's the case?
To be honest, I credit a lot of it to CrossFit.
Mhm.
I actually got my start in strongman because of CrossFit.
Huh.
And, seeing, the games there being yoke carries and farmers walks and, then bringing in like the D balls and, a lot of the sled pushing, it starts to make strongman relatable. I think for the longest period of time, a lot of people saw World's Strongest Man on TV and they see these 6'6", 6'9" behemoths of men. And it automatically makes it unrelatable for anybody to think that they could do it as well. I think that's one of the coolest things about me being at this level. I'm consistently the shortest and lightest athlete, 5'10", about 285 pounds. And, to see that there's some relatability, and now you see CrossFit athletes doing the same implements that we use at World's Strongest Man. I think it gives people that sense of encouragement to be able to go to a gym and pick up a log or pick up a yoke and try an Atlas stone. And like I said, I think just the relatability across the board is really what has been bringing up strongman over the course of the couple of years. And then you also have companies like Rogue who are just diving headfirst into the sport and really supporting us athletes at the top through the amateur ranks, giving us access to the best equipment and putting us out on their platforms.
I think you touched on something like that. I think a lot that resonates with a lot of CrossFitters, right? You said you're the shortest and the lightest athlete, but it still allows you to compete because of the mix of what you do in the training that you're able to do. And I think that resonates with a lot of people at the CrossFit gym, where maybe in other sports, you like in basketball, right? If you're under 6 feet, it's going to filter you out eventually. And
yeah,
I think having fitness and strength as an equalizing sport in some ways is something that has allowed that popularity. And I'm curious now, because you mentioned that CrossFit was your intro into strongman. How did that go about?
So I actually stepped foot into my first CrossFit gym in 2009. I was a senior in high school and I was working out at my high school gym. And one of the substitute teachers was actually a level 1 coach. Noticed I liked lifting some stuff and was like, hey, like, you look like you might be good at this. Why don't you come start training at the gym I coach at? So I'd actually go to the 5 a.m. class before school, like 4 to 5 days a week. And they really taught me the basics on the barbell movements. I found out really quickly how terrible I was at doing CrossFit stuff. And, really just kind of, they were the ones that really pushed me in this direction of strength sports. And sure enough, it was a Tuesday morning. I walked into the gym and they were like, hey, we found a local strongman contest this weekend. We signed you up for it. We figured you should go try it out. I had never tried any of the implements, had never done anything, went there, got my ass handed to me, but had a blast doing it. And, like to this day, I actually still do like 3 CrossFit workouts a week.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. So why is it that, and I don't know if this is the case, but this is just my perception from being around the sport in the little time that I've been in it. Why, and this, I guess this road would go both ways. Why don't more strongman athletes incorporate more CrossFit stuff into their training? And why should, I guess, CrossFit athletes incorporate strongman training?
For me, I there's such a relatability between the two sports, right? And I think you look on the surface level, I think on the outside looking in, when strongmen see CrossFitters, we're just like looking at them dumbfounded as to how the heck they're doing what they're doing, and vice versa, right? And I think at the Rogue Invitational, we saw that firsthand, us being able to compete on the same floor as the fittest people in the world. It was really cool to see that the two styles of athletes coming along and coming together. In terms of training styles, it really does make sense, right? Because so right now I go to a 6 a.m. class Monday, Wednesday, Thursday. I do the workout, whatever it is, in the gym. And for me, the relatability between, a high intensity, short conditioning workout really pays a lot of dividends in strongman, because that's what we do. It's, 60 to 75 second events where we're just all out 100%. And having a motor that can go a little bit longer in those events really does pay off. And then vice versa, we're seeing more strongman implements in the CrossFit games and even at local comps. So, I think CrossFit is built around doing things that, make you better at all sports, and also just being ready for whatever life throws at you. And if you're out in your yard cleaning up and you have to move a boulder, well, strongman training is going to help you do that. So I think there really is such great crossover between the two sports.
Yeah. You hit the nail on the head with what I was thinking. I was like, yeah, CrossFitters could really benefit from that, because if we're talking about being prepared for life, whether it's, lifting stuff in your backyard or Sean lifted up his kid, whatever it may be, moving in those non-traditional planes and movement patterns and being able to be strong there is certainly helpful. I'm kind of curious what your sporting background is. What was like growing up? What sort of sports, if any, did you play? And also on top of that, what were your general interests in life? Because I do think in some ways our interests outside of sports also help guide our direction in sports as well.
I was one of those kids that just wanted to do everything, right? So my actual main sport growing up for the longest time was baseball. I was a third baseman, usually batted fourth in the lineup, and actually suffered an injury, ironically, in the weight room my sophomore year of high school that made me miss baseball tryouts that year. And sophomore year was also when I started playing football. So played football in high school, missed baseball tryouts, but fell in love with the weight room. So I was like, you know what? I'll take the spring off. I'll just focus on football and weightlifting. And then I also got into cheerleading in high school as well. Mm-hmm. So I was doing actually all single base stunting and cheerleading as a high schooler, so throwing up the flyers over my head, catching them and stuff like that. And then, honestly, once I hit my senior year in high school and went off to college for athletic training and sports medicine, it's been nothing but strongman. Ever since I was 17 years old, that has been my focus in terms of sport. And then outside of that, I was one of those hyperactive kids when it comes to student involvement in the school, right? So high school class president. I had a band in high school and in college. I was a student trustee at my college, involved in every club and organization you could imagine. So really, I never liked to be bored, and that was really kind of how I went about my entire life, and I seem to still be doing now.
Do you think that it seems like you had this genuine interest and curiosity to whether it be involvement in organizations, but seek out other areas of improvement or involvement. And I don't know, do you think that helps in a sport like strongman where there is diversity in the skill set, where you can't just be hyper-focused on one thing and you kind of have to build things as boring as or not exciting as it may be?
I think that's why I love strongman so much. It's because, like I said, I've been doing the sport for 13 years and I've never once done a competition that's the same. Mm-hmm. So every time I get invited to a show or I, decide to compete at a contest, I know that those certain 5 or 6 events I've never done in that order or the way they're set up ever before. And having that consistent excitement is really what's been keeping me going, because I've never been stagnant in my life. I've always been looking for, okay, what's the next thing I can get excited about? What can motivate me again? And, every single contest, it's something different, right? So World's Strongest Man, we're about 4 weeks out. We actually still don't even have the events we're going to be doing. So we're just kind of training all over the place right now, just getting ready for whatever they're going to throw at us. And, to me, that's fun, though. Do I think, we might get some better performances out of guys if we know what the events were? Sure, why not? But that's what it means to be the world's strongest man, right? And I think there's some parallels there to the CrossFit Games in terms of, we think back at what year was it? 2018 was it Chaos, when they were just lined up on the line and they were like, well, figure it out as you go. At the end of the day, the fittest person's going to win. And same thing at strongman. At the end of the day, whoever's the strongest is going to win this competition, regardless of how it's going to be set up.
Speaking of the fittest, you got to hang out with Matt Fraser recently, visiting him at his place. What were the two of you guys working on?
So Matt and I go back a few years because Sammy and I actually, we spent some time together in college.
Okay.
We went to neighboring colleges. So her and I have known each other for a really long time. And it was actually at the Arnold in 2020 when I actually finished the stone event, the first event, and kind of had this epic moment of me diving across the finish line with the Husafelt. And Sammy comes over. She goes, "Rob, you do this stuff?" I was like, "Yeah, and I guess I'm kind of good at it too. It's been a long time." So we just kind of made this connection, and they only live a few hours away from us, so we reconnected at the Arnold this year. And as Matt and I were talking about, the game season coming up, he mentioned that he wanted to get some of his athletes on some strongman equipment. And so I actually went up there, brought some strongman stuff up to, the HWPO headquarters and coached Mal and Jake and Matt actually through some strongman movements just in case they show up at the games. Right. So as a strongman watching the games, I always have those cringe moments, like when they're doing the events. I'm like, oh, they could be doing this so much better. So that really was my goal over the weekend, was kind of fine tuning their technique on some of the strongman stuff that they might be getting at the CrossFit Games. And it was honestly a blast. Yeah, like I said, I get to be around really strong people all the time. And to see, Mal and Jake just, go at it. And that was actually the last week of the Open as well. So it was a lot of fun to just watch them, finish the third workout and train throughout the weekend. It was pretty inspiring for sure.
Yeah.
That's got to be a kind of a cool, like, I don't know, perspective on the journey, right? Like, you say you've been doing strongman for what, 12, 13 years now. And then I can probably imagine you never envision yourself training some of the fittest athletes in the world and teaching your sport and getting to share with that in, the company of, the 5-time fittest man on earth as well.
He's okay.
Well, we agree.
Yeah.
Sammy's way cooler, right?
Oh, totally. But here's the thing, Matt would totally agree with that as well.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
It really is. It's such a surreal moment, because like I said, coming up, starting at a CrossFit gym in 2009, that's when, we had, Kalipa, Froning was just kind of coming into the scene. Annie was winning the games. Now to be kind of embedded into the community a little bit, working with Matt and some of the HWPO crew, it's really been so freaking cool for me. I'll be honest, my husband and I are kind of CrossFit nerds. We geek out all the time. We think it's the coolest thing. That's why we do it a few times a week here at a local box. And it's really cool to be on this side of the fence now, kind of involved in the sport. Him and I actually a couple of years ago got our level 1s. So it's been a lot of fun, being kind of diving into this community a little bit more, while also being one of the strongest men in the world.
There's a lot of parallels that I hear from when I talk to people in the strongman community. You hear the same thing, the same descriptions about the strongman community as you do about the CrossFit community. So what is the strongman community like?
A dysfunctional brotherhood. Right. I mean, we come from all corners of the globe, and it's one of the few, if not the only other sport besides CrossFit where you're competing against somebody and cheering for them at the same time. Mm-hmm. Right. Like there is just such a mutual respect between all of us competitors to understand what it really takes to get to this level of the sport. The years of sacrifice, the injuries, the long days of training and everything we go through to get to this level in the sport. Like some athletes had it easier than others. There's some athletes that get to World's Strongest Man in 2 or 3 years. For me, it took me 8 to get to the pinnacle of the sport. And once you get there, everybody, it doesn't matter what your background is or anything like that. As long as you're there to put on a show, have fun, and do your best, that's really all that we all care about. And it's been really, really cool to see that. And, we've made some of our best friends in this sport, being able to travel around the world with them and have these amazing experiences together.
And you mentioned the timeline for people, getting up to the top or getting involved. And I think you maybe touched on it a little bit when you mentioned that you just got signed up for like a local comp. Is that kind of the entry level way for people to start, accessing the sport as a competitor?
Yeah. So here in the US, there's actually 2 amateur organizations. We have United States Strongman and Strongman Corporation. So those are actually broken up into a couple of different weight classes for both men and women. So really making the sport accessible to anybody that wants to try it. Right. So my husband, he competes in like either the 200-pound weight class or the 175-pound weight class. For women, they have all the way down to 140, all the way up to heavyweight, and for the men as well. So there really is a lot of accessibility in the sport in order to get your feet wet, get into it. And, they have the novice division. So if you've never done a competition before, you can get in, and really start to learn how to compete in this sport. And then from there, it really is kind of like a tiered system to get to the highest level. So working your way through the amateur ranks, becoming a recognized pro in the sport of strongman, that is really what it takes to get recognized to then go to the next level of competition, which we would see as like, there's the official strongman games that happens in Florida every year. The podium finishers for the heavyweight men get invited to a Giants Live competition, which is the qualifying tour for World's Strongest Man. And that's really the only way you get into Worlds now, is going through a Giants Live competition. So you have to take top 3 finish at a Giants Live show, That'll get you to Worlds, or put on one great performance at a non-sanctioned Giants Live show to kind of get the attention of the people at World's Strongest Man. When we look at contests like the Arnold and the Rogue Invitational, those are more selective. Being only 10 athletes, they look at the competition year as a whole and invite who they feel are the top 10 strongest men in the world at that time. And that's why, honestly, I've been so fortunate to be at both of those competitions, just recently. And it's so humbling for me to be able to do that. And, for some people, it comes easy. You tend to see that with the bigger guys, right? The guys that are, they come to the sport, they're 6'5", 330 pounds. And, it might be a little bit easier for them to get to that World's Strongest Man level. But for me, I actually worked my way through 3 different weight classes before I got to World's Strongest Man. I actually started competing under 200 pounds, worked my way to the 231 division, and then bumped up to the open heavyweight division in 2017.
Back in 2014, you made the decision to come out. What led you to ultimately make that choice?
So I lived the first 22 years of my life as, a stereotypical heteronormative male, right? Mm-hmm. So I was doing what I felt I had to do and what I thought everybody wanted me to do. I was actually in a relationship with a girl for a little while. And, one day I woke up and I realized how exhausted I was from pretending to be somebody I wasn't every single day. Right. So every day I would wake up and I would have to put on this facade and, think about how I was interacting with people, think about how I would talk to people, what I would say. And, I don't really know what the moment was, but I just realized this is ridiculous. I'm tired of this. Mm-hmm. And, so ended that relationship and kind of went on this little self journey and was actually fortunate enough to meet my husband not long after that. And, through the support of him and, finally accepting myself and, it's tough that it took 22 years for me to do that, but, was finally able to do that and finally realize and accept myself for who I am. And, at 22 years old, I kind of had this mentality that if you didn't like it, I didn't need you as a part of my life, So when I came out in October of that year publicly, it was really for that reason that I wanted to live my life how I wanted to. And I was also dating this guy who had actually been out since he was 17 already. So I really didn't feel that was fair for him. Mm-hmm. And, when I first did it, it wasn't for anybody but myself and my now husband. But we quickly realized that it became a much larger story than me just being an openly gay strongman.
Yeah. What was the reaction among those around you?
Overwhelmingly positive, so I'm unbelievably fortunate for that. And I realize that that's not everybody's story, but fortunate that my family and friends were unbelievably supportive when I did come out. And, a friend of ours decided to write an article actually about me coming out because he kind of put the pieces together that I was the first and only openly gay professional strongman at the time. And he felt that this needed some traction, that people needed to hear this story. So, pretty quickly it went viral. We weren't expecting that. We weren't expecting to be kind of an overnight news story, but that's how things went. And that's when we kind of realized that we were put in this place and had this platform now to have a message and really try to be somebody, within the sport, especially, a hyper masculine sport like strongman.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And touching on that, like what has been the response and the work that you've been able to do in that journey since? Because like you mentioned, there's this outer appearance of like this overly hyperly masculine, massive behemoth type people engaging in, this sport. And I'd imagine that maybe there's some pushback or maybe it's just been a pretty smooth ride.
I would say for the people that understand the culture of strongman, everybody was supportive. Right. So people that understand the work it takes and the brotherhood we actually have at this level of the sport, all the competitors were amazing. And people that understood that about the sport were awesome. It's people on the outside looking in that didn't really quite get that. And those were always the one that had negative stuff to say. And listen, to be honest, over the years, as my platform's gotten bigger, as, I've gotten a little bit more popular in the sport and stuff like that, social media is a beautiful and a terrible thing all at the same time. So, every time there's a competition and I get a little hype behind my name, there's always a lot of pushback and a lot of negativity. But, to be honest, I've just kind of gotten used to it at this point, because I also realize when I'm competing, I'm also one of the guys that gets the loudest cheers from the crowd every time I step up. Right. So, I always use those negative messages to my advantage, because to me, I feel there's no bigger FU to those people than my success.
Yeah. I'm sure your visibility and your message have had an impact on people. Is there an instance where you really realized that you were having a positive effect on people, and what was that?
Yeah. So I think the first time it really hit me was it was back in 2016. So I was kind of well known, but really not on this big stage, or maybe it was 2017. And I received a message from actually a high school student who said he was, contemplating taking his life because he was having this inner battle of his sexuality. He didn't feel that he would have support from his family or friends, and he really didn't know where he saw himself in the world until he came across my profile on social media. And being able to see a guy who's in an amazing relationship with his husband and, one of the strongest men in the world, and just being unapologetic about it all along the way, it gave him a reason not to go through with that. And that was the moment that I realized, what I was doing was bigger than just lifting weights. Mm-hmm. It was bigger than me just stepping out onto the competition floor and performing in the sport that I love. It comes down to every time that I make a social media post, or every time I compete, there's a message behind what I'm doing. And, it's breaking those barriers, breaking those stereotypes, and, making people rethink what they know about homosexuality and stuff like that. And, being able to do that has been, it's kind of come second nature, and it's been absolutely empowering and so amazing. That's part of the reason why the rainbow hair, has made an appearance a few times now, and, it's really powerful. And since then, I continue to get messages like that on a pretty regular basis. And those are the ones that, a single message like that outweighs every single negative comment I'll ever get. Mm-hmm. And those are the ones that really keep me going.
And you kind of backtracking a little bit, you mentioned you spent 22 years, as a heteronormative male, doing something that you didn't feel was genuine to yourself, putting on this facade. I'm curious what the process looked like once you did, because you mentioned you went on your own little personal journey, and I'm sure there's some people that might be listening to this that are trying to maybe figure out their process. And what were some of the things that helped you along in that journey?
The biggest thing for me was reframing what I thought life was going to look like. I had lived 22 years of my life thinking that I was going to have this white picket fence life, with a wife and kids and doing that normal thing. And it quickly changed overnight once I accepted myself for being a gay man. And that was difficult to do, because you go through life thinking, this is what I'm going to do. This is what I'm supposed to do, how I'm supposed to do it. And it changes in an instant. But once I realized that, I also realized that I was finally experiencing what it meant to be really happy. Because up until that point, everything I thought I knew about happiness was fake, because I was just pretending every single day. So once I was able to do that, I was like, oh, damn, this is sick. Right? Like, yeah. So to be able, it didn't come overnight. It wasn't an easy thing to come to terms with. But once I did, and I was able to, no pun intended, take that weight off my shoulders, it kind of just opened up this door to happiness that I had never experienced before. And the biggest thing for me is, like, I had amazingly supportive friends that, were the first people I went to when I was going through this, and I told them, and absolutely nothing changed between, in our relationship. And they were there to support me and, be a shoulder to cry on when I need to, and make me laugh. And, when I was going through all this stuff. And that's really what made it easier for me. But, again, like, it wasn't an easy journey, but there was nothing in my life more rewarding than that.
Mm-hmm. And kind of the inverse of that, what were some of the unforeseen obstacles? What were some of the things that, were I don't know if negative feedback is the way to go or to phrase it, but what were some of the things that you had to work through ultimately that maybe you didn't foresee having to deal with, that maybe other people who are in the process of coming out or going through that journey that can, maybe learn from?
I think for me, it was quieting those voices that you constantly see online or sometimes even see in public, right? There's been multiple times where my husband and I are walking down the street holding hands and people are screaming slurs at us, as they're driving by. And also dealing with that on social media. And I think going through life, from a straight lens, and then you always hear about what it's like to go through those experiences, but actually having to deal with those, it was things I didn't expect, right? Because I think you hear about them in the media all the time, or you hear stories and you're like, oh, like that doesn't really happen. And then it does happen and it makes it real. But again, honestly, it goes back to having that support system that you can lean on, that are going to be there no matter what. And, like I said, I'm fortunate enough that my family and friends were there for me. Sometimes family's not there, but the nice thing about that is, family's not always blood, right? Like the one part of the LGBTQ community that we always talk about is we have our chosen family, and those are the people around us that we choose to lean on, and we know will be there for us no matter what. And that's something that, we've really leaned into over the years, and it's something that's helped us out a lot.
I read this quote from you, and I think this was something you said to a group of middle schoolers, and it was, the biggest thing I want you all to realize is once you aren't afraid to actually be yourself, that's when you actually get to experience real happiness. Why do you think it's so important for kids, regardless of gender identity or anything like that, just to hear that message?
Because being happy is really cool.
Yeah.
Like I said, I lived 22 years of my life thinking I knew what happiness was. Right. And it was, I was going about my day, putting on my happy face and acting happy all the time, and just trying to be that smiley, charmful person, not realizing that I was pushing back all of these thoughts, all of these feelings, and not actually dealing with them. And once I let them come through, I realized who I was. And that alone just opened up these doors to where, it's really freeing when you don't have to think about how to interact with somebody you're talking to, and you can just be yourself. And it was in those moments that I realized, I was like, wow, this is so cool. Like I am having so much fun with life right now because I can just be me. And I think so many people oftentimes worry about everybody else in the room and don't worry about themselves enough. And especially in those moments, especially with that quote, that's really what was sitting with me in those moments.
Mm-hmm. I can't remember where I heard the quote, but it was said to me once growing up about authenticity being the path to self-discovery. And it really resonates, like hearing you talk about that as well. And I'm curious what sort of maybe elements of yourself that you unlocked or that you learned about yourself that were inside once you were able to experience true happiness and start to, not have to put up that facade.
There's a lot more sass, Tommy.
Oh yeah. All right. I love it.
You know what? I think like fun is just the word that comes to mind, right? I think part of the reason I was so involved in high school and in my undergraduate years was because I was trying to keep myself busy to stop myself from dealing with what I was actually going through. Right. And once I was able to like kind of pull the blinds back and look at myself for once, I was like, wait a minute, there's a whole part of me that I haven't even acknowledged yet. And once I was able to do that, I realized, I just like to have fun. I think Sean saw it at the Arnold. There wasn't a single time when I was competing that I was upset or sad. I zeroed an event. And I was like, this is dope. I get to do this for fun, right? Like standing in front of 5,000-6,000 people, and I just zeroed. I didn't even lift the freaking stone, but I was having a blast. And that's really, really what just comes to mind when I think about that. It's just like I finally let my real personality come through, and that really just is centered around having a good time and making people feel good.
Why do you think it's still difficult for professional athletes, because there's got to be more than you and then Carl Nassib from the Las Vegas Raiders who recently came out. There just has to be more out there. Gay men competing in professional sports. Why do you think it's still difficult for them to come out while they are competing?
I think there's still this stigma of what people think it means to be a gay man, right? So especially me growing up, we always see gay men as feminine, flamboyant figures in media, and there's, I guess another way to put it is like, growing up, I guess I never thought I was possible because I never saw somebody like me doing what I wanted to do. We always see, straight men, straight couples in every single major professional sport. And, especially, I'm 30 years old, so I'm not that old, but even growing up, you deal with that homophobic rhetoric in the locker room and just on the playing field constantly. And that suppresses a lot of feelings and makes you feel that you can't be yourself in the sport that you love competing. So I think, and I hope we're starting to see a change with that as the younger generation is coming up. We obviously see there's a lot more acceptance with the LGBTQ plus community. And I hope that we start to see a transition to more openly gay athletes, because it really does. It's so empowering to see somebody like yourself represented in sports, in media, in movies and music and stuff like that. And it makes kids see themselves in those people. And, that's kind of been my entire goal with, using the handle World's Strongest Gay, is opening up the world of strongman to an entirely different group of people that would never be exposed to the sport. And, that's why it's just been so fun for me, and something that, again, I never thought I'd be doing, sitting here and, competing at some of the sickest strongman competitions in the world.
Do you feel, and you touched on some elements of modeling, which I think is pretty well known, the importance for young kids to be able to see themselves in other people, to understand that the path in front of them is available to them. And we talk about fighting the stigmas, and I obviously think exposure is a huge part of that. Is there any other ways that you feel are effective in kind of combating that stigma outside of high level of exposure and being an open advocate?
To me, I think it's honestly just, I hate to use this term, but normalizing life, right? I think all too many times people that are a part of the LGBT community are hypersexualized automatically. It's, I guess the issue that Joey and I see all the time is, if Joey and I, if I post a picture of myself and Joey on social media, 90% of the time, they're amazing, supportive comments. But those other comments, it's not about two men that are in love. The thought automatically goes to sex for some reason, as opposed to when you see a heterosexual couple on social media, they see a loving family, right?
Interesting point.
And so I think it's changing that narrative of two men can be in love and show their affection, and it's not about sex. Same thing with two women. And I think that's really where the conversation has to start, is not sexualizing LGBTQ relationships, because at the end of the day, we're just two people that fell in love, and we're just trying to show to the world that there's nothing strange about that, and it's completely normal and acceptable.
You got to marry your boyfriend after, I think was it 2019 when you won Arnold Strongman Australia?
Yeah.
And Arnold Schwarzenegger himself was there to, congratulate you. What did it mean to have someone who, is that big of an icon in the entire fitness landscape give his support to what you were doing?
Surreal doesn't even begin to explain it. So here we actually planned this wedding a month before we went to Australia. So we had been engaged for about 2 years, and my husband was in grad school at the time. And so I was going to compete at this contest. He was like, you know what, let's just get married when we go there. I was like, yeah, I'm in. So we put together this wedding, and I just happened to win the competition, which, cherry on top of the weekend, because I was already going to win. I was getting married that weekend. That trip was going to be great no matter what. So I come away with the win, and as I'm being interviewed by Arnold on the stage that night on Saturday, he was like, he asked me what I had planned for the rest of the weekend. So I was like, well, actually, I'm getting married tomorrow. So he invited Joey up on stage and, was congratulating us and giving his support. And the next morning I woke up to a text message from his assistant who wanted to know because Arnold wanted to know when and where the wedding was. And then after the wedding, Arnold decided to treat us even more and ended up chartering a yacht for us, took us out to dinner. Yeah, I mean, it was just out of this world amazing. And the best part about that night is after dinner, Joey and I are walking back to the hotel and he goes, so it really doesn't get any better than this. I was like, oh no, it's completely downhill from here on out. Like we reached the peak day one and it is straight down from there. But to have that support from arguably the biggest icon in strength sports ever, really, I don't know if there really are words. It's still something that it lives so vividly in my mind to this day. And to just be up on that stage, to hear his words of love and support, to see him go on social media and post about us as well, and, just really go back against anybody that said anything negative, and to still have that friendship today really is just, it's crazy to me, because when I got into this sport in 2009, to be frank, I sucked. And I never imagined or hoped that I would even be competing at this level. And now to be friends with Arnold and then working with Matt Fraser and competing at World's Strongest Man and the Arnold Strongman Classic. I mean, it's literally unfathomable to me that I get to do this stuff. And yeah, it's wild.
Mm-hmm. To me, you've always come across as a natural advocate. It just seems like, representing, your community seems so natural and it flows through you easy. Even on like some of the, big platforms, you've been on the biggest media platform on the planet multiple times in Joe Rogan. Is that something that you actively work on, or has it always come natural to you? Because I know for some people, the pressure of maybe trying to be an advocate doesn't always manifest the best.
I think I'm pretty fortunate that, I'm comfortable in front of a camera and a mic. And, for me, I think it comes easy because I'm just telling my story. And I'm fortunate that my story is, it's been a relatively easy one. And we were thrust into the spotlight pretty quickly, but having an amazingly supportive husband that's had my back the entire time, and allowing us to share our story of our relationship and our trials and tribulations and my struggles in strongman, and just kind of molding those two worlds together. It's really just come natural. And I think also I'm at this place where I really don't care what other people think about me. I'm here to spread a message of love and happiness, right? Like I always tell people, it's easier to love than hate. And if I know at my core that's the message I'm trying to get across every time I'm on a platform or putting up a social media post, then I know I'm doing my job. And I really could care less what negative things people have to say to that, because I feel good about the message I'm putting out.
Final question for you. And again, we just thank you so much for taking the time to do this. What makes you optimistic that we are heading in the right direction? Because I just think back in my life, the nearly 50 years I've been on this planet, the amount of progress that we've made in the LGBTQ community and the acceptance has been immense. But we obviously have there's a lot more that needs to be done. But what makes you optimistic that we can get there?
I think I'm kind of boots on the ground. Like I said, I still work in a high school, and being around high school students, they are amazingly resilient at times. And what I've realized, is they also just realize that everybody should just have basic human rights. I know it's a crazy concept, wild. But, I think it is this younger generation that's just like, why has this ever been a problem? They can't answer that question. And I think that's the coolest thing in the world, that they don't understand why people have ever had a problem with this. And, we have trans students at my high school, and they are treated as the gender they identify as, and nobody bats an eye. Whether, they're high school boys, high school girls, everybody just goes about their day, and nobody questions their identity. Nobody questions their pronouns. It's just who they are. And I think being able to see that in real time on a regular basis is what makes me excited for what's to come. There's always going to be pushback. There's always going to be negativity, and there's always going to be a fight that we're in. But I think more and more we're getting more people on our side, and we're seeing the power of strength in numbers really come forward here.
Yeah. Well, Rob, thanks again, man, for taking the time to do this. Really appreciate it. When is the World's Strongest Man?
Oh gosh, so I fly out to Sacramento for Worlds on May 20th. The competition starts on May 24th. Finals wrap up on the 29th. So 5 days of tough competition. Yeah, so we're right in the thick of it right now. It's the prep is tough. I actually was just out in LA yesterday doing a shoot for Gymshark, and ended up having to do a back squat workout that I'm still regretting, and I know I'll be regretting tomorrow. I ended up squatting 415 pounds 57 times in 10 minutes. So stairs are the enemy today, that's for sure.
My God.
Yeah, I don't recommend it.
Yeah, I was hoping I'd be able to go, but Tommy and I are going to be in Knoxville. My parents live I'm from Sacramento, so I was hoping I could go check it out. But yeah,
well, I mean, I'll be out at the games in August, so we'll see you guys there.
Perfect.
Sure.
All right, good. Yeah, we'll definitely have to catch up then. And look, best of luck, man. Again, thank you so much for doing this, and really appreciate you taking the time.
Absolutely, thank you, guys.